Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for a very special occasion. It's our inaugural Moms Fight Back Fireside Chat. Unfortunately, we don't have a fireplace today, but we'll work on that for the future. But what I'd like to do is welcome Dr. John Nicoletti here with us, who is a police psychologist and also owns his own company, but is one of the most well-known experts in school safety in the state of Colorado. And we'd like to talk to him a little bit today about how do we keep our kids safe, what do we need to do with the school level, what do we need to do as a parent and as a community member. So after I have a chance to talk to him myself, I'll open it up to questions, so keep your questions in mind and we'll invite you up to the mic later. So thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. First of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be involved in this issue?
I'm a police psychologist. We work with a lot of the police departments and law enforcement agencies around here and around the country, and agencies like NCIS, and we do work with them, and we also do a lot of what's called violence risk assessment with schools and government agencies and businesses.
And how long have you lived in Colorado?
Native.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What town?
Denver.
Oh, cool. That's great. So you've seen a lot of things change over the years.
Yes.
Then. Yeah, especially the things we've gone through in the community with the various school shootings and a lot of incidents at the schools.
Yeah, and unfortunately I was on scene of most of them.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Are you a parent as well?
Yes.
How many kids do you have?
One, and she's a teacher in Jeffco, first grade teacher.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I want to start by asking, what should our top priorities as parents be in an effort to protect our kids when we send them off to school?
Probably the number one priority would be awareness.
Okay.
You know, it's a balance between, on one hand, feeling, oh my God, the schools are unsafe, my children will never come back alive, versus the other hand that we hear a lot of districts, oh, it'll never happen here, but we call denial. So you got to get that balance that, you know, these things can happen, but we can also be protected against them.
And how do you protect your child as a parent? How do you find that, like, what does that balance look like as a parent? I have a first grader and I have a college student, so they're very different situations, but let's take the first grader as an example.
Well, first of all, you got to look at what am I trying to protect my child against. Violence we break down to categories, and each type of attacker has their own unique characteristics. So if you're trying to protect your child against, say, a kidnapper or a molester, that's different than protecting your child against a bully or a school shooter. So you got to decide, what am I trying to protect my child against?
Is there a way to protect our child as a parent from a school shooter?
Yes.
And what does that look like?
Well, we always like to start at the first phase before somebody becomes a school shooter. There's two types of individuals that are workplace violence or school shooters. One we call an insider, the other we call an outsider. An insider is somebody that's on your radar, that you're aware of, the school's aware of. Most of the shootings are insiders, like 85%, meaning people knew about it. Then you have what's called an outsider. So an outsider would be like James Holmes at the movie theater. So the folks in the movie theater that night on July 20th had no idea the person in the front row with the orange hair was going to be a shooter.
Right. So there's a lot of discussion around the schools and what the schools should be doing to protect the kids and create a safe learning environment for them. And that's part of why we're here today, is to hear from parents and community members about what their concerns are. So what, in your mind, what is the role of a school in protecting the children? Where is that line drawn?
Well, if you look inside a school, there's two kind of categories, three categories of responsibility. One, what we call detectors. The second is detectors and disruptors, and the third would be disruptors. So the kids are going to be detectors. They're going to be the first to see a concerning behavior. So what you got to do is train the kids and alert the kids on what to look for, and then what to do once you get a concern, how to report it. And that's where Safe to Tell comes in. It helps with the detection. Now, teachers, coaches, folks like that play a dual role. They're out there teaching, so they're a detector, but they also have a certain authority, meaning they have a certain responsibility to be a disruptor. So if they see somebody doing something, they need to take action. There's no such thing in this day and age as being an observer. That's one of the things that drives me crazy. You go into a place and they say, well, let's keep an eye on. No, if somebody's doing a concerning behavior, whether it's your kid or in a school, and you're just keeping an eye on, you're allowing that behavior to continue. And the third category, which is really important, is what we call the threat assessment team. They're disruptors. They're not detectors, but as soon as they get the intel, their job is to take action and do something. So everybody plays a role in safety.
Now, today, I think we're all much more aware of things that can go wrong at the school, but are there more incidents today than there were 10 years ago, or is it just the raised awareness?
No, there are more incidents. We do what are called algorithms. We look every year all the different shootings, and are they in workplaces or military institutions or schools, and there's definitely an increase.
All right, so is there a certain school, like elementary or middle school, high school, or college that's at risk more than the others?
Well, the highest incident will be either in high school or college. Those are the two that seem to.
Okay. And then there's a lot of, you had a good term earlier when we talked that, school safety is becoming kind of a bumper sticker, a very general term that includes a lot of things. In your mind, when you talk about school safety, what do you include in that term?
Well, again, if we're looking at school safety against an active shooter as opposed to a child molester, what you look at there is a simple concept is if somebody broadcasts it, you need to believe it.
Huh.
When we go in to help with trauma recovery after an incident, what we'll find is the attacker broadcasts, but people didn't believe it. In fact, one of the biggest things we see that a school will have a problem or business is an individual is engaging in a concerning behavior and somebody in that school inserts the word just in the sentence structure. Just the way he is, just frustrated, just having a bad day, just off their meds. Because when you insert the word just to describe somebody's behavior, what does it do to you?
Downplays it?
Downplays it, yeah.
Huh.
So you can see all these movements and predictors there.
Is anybody keeping an eye at the school level, or do you know on the psychology level at social media for the kids?
Huge. 85% of the attackers are broadcasting in social media.
Oh my goodness.
So parents need to be doing it, schools need to be doing it, we do it. I mean, yeah, it's a whole new, the virtual world is huge. It's scary because the virtual world helps the attacker desensitize and dehumanize.
Huh. Is there a correlation between the increased depression and mental illness among young people and their tendency towards suicide and these shootings?
Okay, and that's one that people are going the wrong direction. They're overreacting and it's becoming a witch hunt against kids who have a mental health issue. There's no correlation between any mental health diagnosis and the probability that there'll be a shooter.
Well, that's very important.
I know, and it's really, making it hard for people to come forth with mental health issues because they're afraid, oh my God, they're going to think I'm going to become a shooter because I have a depressed child. Or
right.
When I do a risk assessment, I don't look at the diagnosis.
Huh.
I mean, which category should we automatically arrest? PTSD or bipolar or schizophrenia or sociopath? If you arrested all the sociopaths, you wouldn't have politicians. I know they say. So yeah, don't look at the mental health issue.
What is the profile of a school shooter?
There's a very definite profile, and you can see each step where they're at. The first step is always what we call a perceived injustice. Hey, the debate coach kicked me off the debate team. The girls at Alpha Phi wouldn't have sex with me. It was always this. And it doesn't have to be real. And what happens is, like the Santa Barbara shooting, he was upset because he felt girls were deliberately not having sex with him. So people minimize that. What you have to do is, if it's real for that individual, it better be real for you. So the first stage is perceived injustice. Then they go to feeling victimized. And what you'll hear them say at that point in time is, because you won't date me, because I got kicked off the debate team, or because I got kicked out of CU. That's the victimized. Then they go to what's called externalization of responsibility. It's the school, it's my debate coach, it's all. You start hearing say you, he, she, them, Alpha Phi. And then they start obsessing, and that's a looping in the brain where that's all they can think about. And then they go to what we call an attack behavior.
Yeesh. It seems fairly predictable, though.
It is. What we tell schools and businesses, you shouldn't have an attack from an insider. We can disrupt behavior up to the point that they go tactical. Once they go tactical, you got to go tactical.
All right, so that's a good point. Once, are our schools trained well enough right now to react to an incident?
I know you're talking about an incident being an active shooter or an incident leading.
Sorry, an active shooting. They
have what's called, it was actually developed by the father of Emily, who was killed at Platte Canyon, John Michael Keyes, and he developed what's called standard response protocols. And those of you that are parents or work in schools, you've probably heard of lockdowns. Yeah, and what they do is locks, lights, and out of sight.
Locks, lights, and out of sight.
Yeah, and in all the schools, in all the workplaces over all the years, they've never breached an interlocked door.
An interlocked door meaning when you walk into a school, like the door to the classroom?
Classroom door,
Huh.
yeah.
That's
Some
interesting.
schools, not here, which is really scary, you know, some schools, the outside door locks, but the inside classroom doors don't. And that's not a hard target, that's a burial tomb.
Oh.
That's the library at Columbine or the classroom at Sandy Hook. So locked doors are very, very powerful.
So with all the legislation and the talk of all these things that we want to try and accomplish, if you were able to pass a bill or a couple bills, what would you do? Or what would you tackle?
I guess I would tackle, I mean, active shooter is important, but I would tackle, let's do it before they get to the point that they engage in what we call an attack behavior.
Okay.
Focus on the early broadcast, because every attacker broadcasts.
How do you do that as a school? Just keep a very close eye on social media and use the Safe to Tell program?
And, you know, teachers and other places, that's a detection. But then once you see somebody who's starting to broadcast, then there's got to be a disruptor. There's got to be a countermeasure. You've got to do something.
Can you, do you know enough about the Safe to Tell program to tell the audience about it?
Yeah, I'm on the board. So.
Oh, good. It's pretty cool, but I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, it was a program that developed after Columbine. You know, one of the issues we found after Columbine was some kids knew about these things, but they're afraid to go tell because they either didn't know who to tell or they're afraid if I told somebody that they'd look at me as a snitch and I'd get in trouble. So Safe to Tell was set up as a program where they could call in a number and be anonymous, and people would respond to that. And over time, it's gotten more sophisticated. In fact, they have a really nice computer program at this point in time that you can track things, you can do real-time talking to the person. So
And they're launching an app, right?
that's the app, yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, and there's been tons of cases. You know, people never hear about the success cases. You only hear about the tragedies. There's been tons of success cases, whether it's a suicidal girl or somebody who's threatening to do another Columbine.
So it is working to help prevent
Oh, totally, yeah.
that? Good. And is Colorado the only one doing that?
Colorado's set the stage. Now other states are starting to kind of want to borrow that or use it or hook up. And, yeah, Wyoming's starting to get involved.
I think one of the way parents can help that I heard at the school safety committee meeting was that not a lot of people know about Safe to Tell. And the more parents and community members we can tell about it, the more people that are out there keeping an eye on things and paying attention to what's going on, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we talk to our children about school safety without scaring them yet, you know, preparing them that it's an issue?
Well, again, that's kind of an urban legend that if you talk to your kids about stuff, they're going to get scared. Kids only get scared when you tell them there's a boogeyman and you don't tell them how to defeat it. Kids like to be empowered, so if you're talking to your kid about, here's what you need to do, that's giving them techniques.
That's good, good. So, on that note, if we were going to grade schools on school safety, we talked a little bit about this, what would the metrics be to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples if we gave all the schools a different grade on how they're doing?
In terms of school safety? So first of all, we'd have to define what do we mean by school safety. So obviously the extreme would be body count,
Right,
right?
yes.
So then you move back and you look at, okay, you look at the number of incidences of attack behaviors that didn't result in a body count. Then you'd move back and look at what we call social and psychological disruption. Social disruption would be behaviors that interfere with the function of a classroom. Psychological disruption would be behaviors that cause other kids to feel intimidated, harassed, or, you know, bullied, those type of things. So you got to have a behavioral index in order to grade something.
Is that possible to do that with all the schools?
If you all can agree upon the metric.
And so if you take it a step farther, which a lot of parents do when we think about school safety, we think about bullying and we think about sexual assault and the new Title IX issues around sexual assault, and a lot of that's in the news around the colleges. How do we keep people laser focused on the first task at hand, which is to prevent a very serious shooting? I mean, obviously all these other things are important, but...
Well, first one is awareness, and this is a sticky part for those of you that are parents. We talk about school responsibility, but also parents have a responsibility too. You can't, as a parent, be in denial about my kid becoming something bad. You know, I was working with a parent the other day, they're concerned about their kid, and I said, well, check their room. And the response was, well, they won't let me in my room. And my asked, how old is your kid? Well, 13. Who owns a house? You know, you're a parent, take some responsibility.
Yeah.
Parent.
I think that's a great point. And I think another thing that we've been talking a lot about on this committee is communicating with the teachers and getting to know the teachers and building a relationship and getting to know your child's friends and just being involved.
And look at your child's social media.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You
If we could stay on top of how to use all of it. I'm just learning Snapchat.
Well, one of the things we talk to parents about is become aware of is your child starting to become radicalized? Now, I don't mean radicalization usually gets associated with terrorism, and it does, but you can also see a kid becoming radicalized to become a school shooter.
Huh.
And so you need to look at kind of who are they visiting, who are they talking to.
Is that kind of, are they going to become more isolated, more angry, more quiet?
Well, the other big thing that motivates people to become an active shooter is what's called the thrill of the thought. That's why you hear people say, hey, I want to do another Columbine. The thought of kind of being able to be that gives you jazz.
Why do you think that there are more incidents of this?
Well, I think there's several things without getting too philosophical. I mean, at the basic statistical level is it gets a lot of publicity. Mm-hmm. You know, you get what's called clustering. And, you know, a lot of schools, hey, I want to do another Columbine. Every year, the anniversary of Columbine, we get concerned in Jeffco because everybody starts making threats and doing things and stuff like that. Social media increases that type of stuff. And then the other part is, again, another sticky issue. We're seeing we're seeing a group of parents I call parents of the new millennium. And what they're doing is they're raising what we call free-range or feral children.
The free-range parenting.
Yeah, they're afraid to discipline their kids. Why don't want to hurt his or her self-concept? Yeah. So.
Obviously, you don't agree with that, or it looks like you don't. Yeah.
No, I mean, so you get this whole group of people, little ones who are entitled, and if they don't get what they want, then they feel it's okay for me to do whatever.
Or to act out.
Act out.
Yeah, it does feel that way. So, what have we learned from the shootings that have happened? Is there anything specifically that you can say, wow, we know this now after the past couple years, just the more recent ones?
Yeah.
Sandy Hook sense.
We know everybody broadcasts before they attack.
Okay.
And there's tons of success cases, we don't see them. You know, school districts here in Colorado around the country have tons of success cases, but nobody knows about them.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Because it does feel sometimes as a parent like there's nothing going on. We were talking earlier about how every time I walk up to the school, I get a pit in my stomach when the kids come running out of the classroom, and you just kind of look around like what's going to happen. And I think the schools, or we as parents, need to research better what's going on at our schools and the things that they are doing, and applaud them for it and support them in those efforts.
Exactly. Yeah. Very important.
What do you think about the conversation around arming teachers?
Okay. And I always get asked this question, and you know, as a police psychologist, everybody I works with carries from 1 to 3 guns, so it's no big deal. But when it comes to arming, what I was mentioning before we got on there, I do a lot of debriefs for officers and agents who are involved in shootings. Typical distance of a gunfight is about 6 feet. The number of rounds the officer fires will be 6. The number of rounds that hit the suspect will be 1. These are trained people that have to qualify. They're going to miss with 5 rounds. If you have somebody who just goes to a concealed carry course, how many bullets do you think they're going to miss with?
A lot.
Plus, a lot of law enforcement agencies are going to single response officers. There's a shooting, instead of waiting for a rapid response team, they're told, go in there, shoot the person with the gun. Go in the school, here's an individual who's a good guy, has a gun. Officer doesn't know, is that a bad guy or a good guy?
Gotcha.
Because they're not going to go in and say, hey, drop your gun and what's going on. They want to stop it right as soon as they get in there. That being said, it sometimes takes a gun to end a gun. What we know about these shooters is they'll continue to kill until they know they're about to be killed. So it's a double-edged sword.
So one of the ideas that's been passed around in some of the discussions is having retired military, retired police officers, retired firefighter, you know, any of the community service folks that want to come volunteer, or maybe a nonprofit can pay them or compensate them somehow to be on the school grounds, like on the playgrounds. It seems like the playgrounds are a pretty dangerous place. As a parent, I worry about that. But what do you think of that idea?
Well, I mean, that's the same concept as what's called school resource officers.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very powerful. That's why only one young girl got killed at Arapahoe's, because a school resource officer was in the school and started stalking down the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a concept of school resource officers, and so that basically what you're saying is the folks that would be volunteering would be like school resource officers. They're trained, they know what they're doing.
Yeah. And they seem to care very deeply about our community, and that's why they do what they do. So you do what you do, yeah. All right, so how has what we've learned changed things? Is it just made us more prepared, more aware, more freaked out? I mean, all of the above?
All of the above, but mostly more prepared.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything that you want me to forward to the folks that I'm working with on the legislation? Any messages that are important to you that they hear?
No, I think you hit on a lot. The other one, though, is solving this problem is a community. It's a, you know, everybody has to be involved. You can't leave it just to the schools. Parents have to take a responsibility. Other community members have to take a responsibility.
That's great. All right, well, let's open it up to the audience. Does anybody have a question?
So we talked a little bit about arming teachers, but one of the things that I notice anytime that an active shooter situation happens, the national media seems to focus on the gun control debate, which based on the conversation today, sounds like is probably not the right thing to be focusing on. What's typically your response when somebody asks about those types of issues, especially around Second Amendment in a state where that is such a hot topic?
Yeah, again, unless you get rid of all guns, gun control isn't going to be a factor in it. It's, you know, the behavioral spectrum.
Sure. So do you believe that tighter gun control restrictions could stop more of these, or will they simply channel their efforts towards another medium of harm?
That's an interesting question. I mean, when we look at how they purchase the gun, there's a percentage of them that steal the gun from somewhere else. So, I mean, how do you, unless you get rid of all the guns, how are you going to do that?
Sure.
So this morning you talked about the shooters in the school. And so one of my questions is, it's not just the shooters that are in the school, but also the young kids that are being bullied and the bulliers. And how does the school keep track of kids that are in crisis with child neglect, child abuse, and sexual abuse?
That's a good question. That's a tough area. I mean, it's like the school is overwhelmed with all these things to follow, and that's where schools just have to kind of be aware of. Like, you bring up an important point, bullying. One of the things that we were talking before we got started, I'm kind of going in a different direction. Bullying is becoming a bumper sticker. So what I tell schools is, let's not look at that word, let's look at the behavior. Because sometimes bullying is just teasing. But in some districts, you look at the behavior and say, that's not bullying, that's an attack related. They're threatening that person. So what I'd rather do is, let's look at the actual behavior rather than a label. And I think that helps kind of sorting things out. But again, what you're talking about, in order to deal with all of those and mitigate all of it, you have to have what we call detectors. Rather the detectors be other kids or teachers or parents or whatever. Again, it's like we talked about before, everybody's got to play a role in this.
So with the detectors, is that teachers or is that where parents need to volunteer to help with that? Do we have an idea on how to help the schools get the detectors out there so they're aware of the issue?
I think it's all of them. You know, it's kids, it's teachers, it's parents, it's volunteers. It's a big task for just, you know, one teacher who has 32 kids in a class to be able to pick that up.
Do all the schools have psychologists in them for the students?
They should, each school district should have a psych team involved in it, yeah.
Okay.
Now, obviously, some of the smaller districts have to use what are called BOCES because they don't have enough resources.
Thank you.
One thing that was shocking at the first committee meeting was that one psychologist handles, I think, 1,000 kids. And it's a little tough to keep track of 1,000 kids, don't you guys think? Especially when the issues are so subtle.
Yeah. You asked, if I can get back to that, you asked for your committee what's something that to consider. One of the things we talked about when this bill came through is there are going to be districts that have limited resources, and they don't want to be, you don't want them to be punished for having limited resources. So I think a good thing for the committee to do would be to develop a team of subject matter experts that if a school district, you know, way out east has an issue and they don't have the resources, they can contact this group to help them with the risk.
It's kind of a portable.
Yeah, vortex, yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, so that's one thing I think that would be important.
Okay.
John, something you said really resonated, that you said that the first tier of protection is really at a community level, where we need to come together and get that awareness going and watch for broadcasts and all. But we've got a community, just like a country, that's extremely divided right now. You've got, on one hand, the extreme denial out there that this will never happen to my child, and then on the other hand, you have the paranoids out there that someone's lurking around every corner. You have any ideas on how we can change that and how we can work together as a community to take some action on this?
And that's an interesting point. It's tough to educate people to get them to be involved. When we go into an incident and do a debrief where they've had a bad situation happen, and we talk to folks who saw what we call the broadcast, and we say, hey, how come you all didn't say something? The number one reason I get is, well, I didn't want to overreact. I didn't want to embarrass myself. I didn't want to embarrass them. So that's the big challenge we have, is how do you override the feeling of people to, hey, I don't want to overreact to that scenario. Because in our world, and you know that with the dividedness, is if you say something, there's going to be another group coming down on you.
Yeah, no matter which way you go.
Yeah, it's a lose-lose situation. Why are you harassing this poor person?
For me, I'm a kind of a be proactive instead of reactive kind of person, and you mentioned that there's so many success stories that we're not hearing about. Is there going to be a way that they can start to film this stuff or educate the schools, educate the families, get this kind of information out so that people can learn, what am I supposed to do? When do I step in? When am I being paranoid? When am I making the right decisions? When is it safe for me to say something? Is there a program that's going to be developed in the future that you think could make a difference where we can be proactive as opposed to reactive?
Well, probably the best example is this program here.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's what you all are doing, right?
Right.
That's probably about as good as a proactive program as you get.
Yeah, it'd be great to see it go into the schools, like part of the whole teaching, get it to the teachers, teach them how to be aware, and also make it available to the parents too, I think would be powerful. Yeah,
I mean, that's probably the best, have obviously age-related programs for kids. Here, if you see this, here's what you need to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Hi, in dealing with the excitement that comes after one of these events, like specifically a shooting, are there ways that the media and we as media consumers can react better so it creates less excitement for a potential copycat?
And that's important. And yeah, one way that, again, you're going to get controversy on this, you start paying a lot of attention to the shooter, and that's going to kind of get other shooters thinking, wow, look at this person. I mean, a good example of that, if we go back in time to suicides with young kids, they used to have a lot of attention to it. And then you'd see, if there's one suicide, there'd be 2 or 3 or 4. They'd really minimize that. But with the shooters, there's always somebody kind of doing a profile of the shooter and all that, which then glorifies to them. Because again, a big motivator is the thrill of the thought.
Magazine covers and
going out in a blaze of glory. I want to do that too, man.
Right.
Hi, John. I wanted to piggyback on what Deborah said about having things come into the schools and whatnot. You gave a lot of great information about the psychology of shooters and some of the things that we can do. Is there a book or resources that we can go out, and some of the things that you said, is there something out there, or have you written a book? Are you going to write a book?
Yeah, I have a couple books on Violence Goes to School and Violence Goes to College, but this school resource that Christine is involved in has stuff, and Safe to Tell has literature. There's a lot of stuff out there. It's kind of fragmented, but different places have some really good things.
Great, thank you.
But you bring up an interesting point. There's no one resource where somebody can go and say, okay, what are my options? Yeah. You have to know, hey, I'll go talk to this person or that person. So I think that would be something that you could do, is have a centralized data resource where people could look at.
I'm so glad you said that. That's what we're doing with Moms Fight Back. Yeah, we're launching our new website in about a month, and
So that'd be perfect.
yeah, it'll be like an Angie's List for resources for parents, and it'll be reviewed by the parents. And so when you go to search, you can say school safety or Dr. Nicoletti, and it'll bring up all the resources that are available around that topic. So hopefully we'll be able to do that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I
Thank you
learned
for
so
inviting
much.
us.
I hope you guys did too. It was fabulous, and hopefully we can stay in touch, and you can help us with Moms Fight Back to educate moms and dads and families and help keep our state very safe and our kids safe.
Well, I think it's an exciting direction you all are going. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great day.
thank you.